Okay, in the interest of time, we're going to get started here. I kind of figured it'd be a little light today, being the start of the fourth quarter, time change happening this week, and a whole host of other issues. All right, so for today, it's quite simple. Kind of two-pronged. I want to give you a idea of how the fourth quarter is going to look for you, and then kind of talk about the assignment that you have for this week. The fourth quarter, we're switching a little bit of the kind of formatting here, where your assignments are now going to be basically assigned on Monday, due on Friday. When I say due on Friday, I actually mean that you can still use the weekend to turn some things in. So don't feel like, you have to rush through something on a Friday and maybe halfway do stuff. It's just kind of more of a guideline. So again, the assignments that you receive now, I'm going to try and post either Sunday night or early Monday morning for the week. And then again, they say they're due on Friday, but in reality, they'll probably, you still have the weekend to work on it. Just kind of keep that in mind moving forward. I don't want you to rush through assignments just because you feel like, oh man, if I don't get it done on Friday, I'm going to get points off. You can do it Saturday or Sunday. I realize some of you have work schedules. And of course, as we start getting closer and closer to the end of the year, it's going to get a little bit more crazy. So again, that's kind of the major switch. The reason we're doing it that way is because we are returning. I'm not sure exactly how many people as of yet are returning live and in person. Now, when we are in person on starting Monday, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be holding class sessions on A days when I would see my second bell, and that is what African American history is. It's second bell. When I see students in person, we'll kind of treat that as a in-class discussion time, really. I'm not going to present any new materials. I can help certainly with anybody that's struggling with the reading. But bottom line is, if you are one of the people that's coming back in person, we're going to treat that as a time period for you to kind of talk and quite honestly, have a somewhat normal classroom experience again. And this class shouldn't be me just talking at you. So I am kind of looking forward to next week and seeing a few of you, if not, if not all of you back in school. But if you are a remote learner, that does not, nothing's going to be different. It's not like I'm going to present things and then, make you watch videos and stuff like that. It's not like I'm going to be holding class sessions every day and requiring extra of you. It's still going to be the same format when it comes to Google Classroom and completing assignments. So that being said, to start off the fourth quarter, you have this reparations assignment that I'm going to get to here in a second. And then next week, you're going to have a quiz over your readings, chapters 8 through 13. So, your first two assignments, one of them is a paper and the other one's going to be a quiz over the book that hopefully you've been reading. And that covers everything from Jefferson's notes. We're talking about how Thomas Jefferson basically was a hypocrite. And look, before we start getting too judgy on Thomas Jefferson, everybody in their own way is somewhat hypocritical. I'm hypocritical, you're hypocritical. Everybody has their hypocrisies. Now it's a matter of degree, of course. But bottom line is everybody does have a way of contradicting themselves in some way, shape, or form. Jefferson's are very egregious, though, however, because he very famously says writes in the Declaration of Independence and even in his notes on the state of Virginia that all men are created equal. When he's writing this type of terminology and he's using that type of verbiage, and yet still is the second largest slave owner in the state of Virginia, you can definitely point to him and say, hey, that's somewhat, if not completely, hypocritical. Now, of course, you have to kind of take them in their time. He's not the only one that's preaching this mantra and yet still being a slave owner, because you're talking about half the country at that point still being a slave society. All the way up to and through the Civil War, you have this discussion about slave owners being hypocritical. And of course, you have the argumentation over people going to church. How in the world can you go to church? And we've talked about that. How in the world can you claim to be a child of God and yet hold other children of God in bondage? So this is, of course, is part of Kendi's argumentation. It's for those of you that watched the videos from last 2 weeks ago with Craig Stephen Wilder talking about the Ivy League school, about how the Ivy League schools like Harvard, Yale, Princeton just turned a blind eye to it completely, just overlooked it entirely. And yet, you know, how many times do you hear people on the news now? Well, the founders' intent. Oh, we have to go back to the founders' intent of the Constitution. Well, we have to remember that the founders' intention of the Constitution was slave owning. So, I mean, you have to be careful when you start looking back on these people and lifting them up to these high echelons of political thought and discourse. They're flawed individuals too. They made mistakes, and certainly Kendi is going to go through and kind of rail Jefferson a little bit. Now you're going to make the transition and start talking about the first of what Kendi, if you read the larger book, Stamped from the Beginning, he really starts to make the argumentation that William Lloyd Garrison is the first anti-racist, that he's the first one to really come along and say it's just wrong in general, and that all creatures of God need to be treated with respect and kindness and love. And quite honestly, Garrison is one of the people that's going to be part of a group called the American Colonization Society, the ACS. The American Colonization Society, just so you know, you're clear on it, was this group of people that believed that the slaves should be free, but that they should be shipped back to Africa and resettled over in Africa. So these are slaves who may have been born here, may have been generationally rooted here, you know, the descendants of the people that came in 1619 and beyond. You know, by the late 1700s, early 1800s, we're talking about 5, 6, 7 generations deep of slave owning. So you're talking about, you know, their great grandfather was a slave. So are they really African at that point? You know, they've been in America. They speak the English language. They've been part of the American society. Is it really fair to then uproot them and ship them back to a place they've never seen? And there was this push by the American Colonization Society that that's the solution, that you take these slaves and you give them their freedom, but that you ship them back to Africa. And we even had a colony over in Africa called Liberia. Okay, root word liberty, Liberia, which is still English speaking. It was started by the British actually to repatriate Africans back into Africa. And it was used by the American Colonization Society to ship Africans back. When we get up to Marcus Garvey here in the early 1900s, when he has his Return to Africa movement, it's going to have heavy emphasis on going back to Liberia. So, and not surprisingly, the capital city of Liberia is Monrovia. It's named after James Monroe, our 5th president, who weirdly enough was a slave owner himself. You know, like, so there's really weird connotations to this whole time period. But he's going to come out and say Garrison initially was part of this organization, but then said, well, colonization is wrong and it's not going far enough. The goal should not be to emancipate and repatriate. Your goal should be emancipate and equate. You know, like you're not giving, you know, you may be giving these folks their liberty, but you're not giving them their humanity. You're not giving them their equality within our society. You're not, you know, granting to them equal status. So Garrison is very much on that track. And so when he starts his newspaper, The Liberator, and really starts to rant and rave about the Southern mentality, if you will, especially in Congress, Garrison becomes public enemy number 1 in the South. Now, he is quickly replaced by another abolitionist by the name of Frederick Douglass as public enemy number 1, because Frederick Douglass all of a sudden kind of disproves, merely by his existence, every one of the racist thoughts that the Southerners had been using to enslave Africans. They had basically said, well, they can't speak, they can't assimilate, they can't educate themselves, they can't speak properly the way that you know, white Americans can. Well, Frederick Douglass completely dashed that because he was way more eloquent than most of these white people that were in Congress. He was way more organized in thought. He could write, he could read, he could, you know, captivate an audience. He was very much a soldier within the abolitionist cause. And because of that, you start seeing the rooting of the abolitionist movement in America in the 1830s and 1840s. And that's going to merely grow all the way up to and through Abraham Lincoln as president, where Abraham Lincoln is going to basically set the stage for not only the Civil War, but the eventual Emancipation Proclamation, and by extension, the 13th Amendment. So that's kind of what you're going to be going over. That's the basic background of the readings that you're going through Stamped here. Okay. And I know it's been a long time since many of you have covered that because you're talking about going back to 8th grade. And that was probably the last time you heard the name William Lloyd Garrison. And even then, it was probably just in passing. I'm pretty sure you guys spent a little bit more time on Frederick Douglass back in 8th grade because he is one of the standards in 8th grade. But bottom line is that's kind of the coverage that you're getting out of Kendi here. So again, you're over the next couple of weeks, you've got the reparations assignment and you have the quiz next week. And that was just setting up kind of the readings for next week. Now the reparations assignment, this is kind of going outside the boundaries here, but it's one of the issues that has come up recently again. And this kind of is one of those issues that, you talk about it and then it goes away for a few years and then you talk about it again and it goes away for a few years. And I'm sure some of you noticed if you've kind of watched some of the videos, Ta-Nehisi Coates, who is a very eloquent professor in his own right and an author of multiple very solid books. If you ever want to read a very good book, and it's short, it's not very long, Between the World and Me, which is kind of a letter to his son. Ta-Nehisi Coates goes through kind of what it is to grow up Black within American culture and trying to teach his son what to look out for. But in reality, it's kind of an indictment of American society about, whenever somebody brings up, whether white privilege exists, I always point them to Coates and his writing, because Coates does a very good job of showing by looking at the Black experience how white privilege is in existence because of his experience and others' experience as Black men and women. So again, Coates is very eloquent in not only his writing, you'll notice in his interview, he's also very eloquent in his discussion over reparations. Now, reparations, for those of you that are kind of a little hazy on what they are, it's the idea, and this is not just a Black-white issue. Reparations are payments for past wrongs. Okay, so it's a way of repaying somebody for their loss of labor, loss of time, loss of freedom. So reparations can take many forms, and it's not without precedent. Okay, historically, there have been reparation payments in American history to Native American tribes. There have been reparation payments to Japanese Americans for Japanese internment during World War II. If you remember, that was the time period after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, where Asian Americans on the West Coast were put into basically concentration camps. They called them internment camps, but they were basically a concentrated group of Asian people who were forced to live in a camp away from society during World War II. It was one of the worst neglects of human rights in the name of national security that we've ever had. And this is, you're too young to remember this, but after 9/11, there was a big push about what do we do with Muslims in America? And thank goodness we had learned from our history not to fall victim to this crazed fear mongering of we've got to separate, we've got to isolate, we've got to whatever. I mean, there were people calling for stuff like that after 9/11 occurred. Those are dangerous undercurrents when you start separating by groups. So I digress, but reparations are this idea that you pay people back for the loss of property, for the loss of their labor, their time, whatever. So, and the main thing, and I think this is where Coates and if you also watch the clip from Real Time with Bill Maher, what are they really looking for? They're looking for, in a reparation, it's a tacit acknowledgement that something went wrong, that there was a poor decision made by the United States government. For lack of better terminology, they're looking for an apology, an official statement that something that the United States government was complicit in or made a decision on is indeed wrong. So that's kind of the point, is the United States government has never officially apologized for the institution of slavery. So that's kind of Coates' main argument here is if you're not going to give payments and you're not going to, try and make things equal economically, well, at least where is the our bad moment? Like our bad, we made a mistake. Where is the acknowledgement that what the decision you made was wrong? And so that's kind of where this reparations argument is as it stands right now. Now, there is renewed push for this because COVID has made it painfully obvious that one of the most afflicted groups of people are poor African Americans, people that are living below the poverty line, who cannot get proper access to medical care, who cannot get proper access to dietary needs, who cannot get proper access towards medical testing, even just to find out if they have COVID or to get the shot as well. And I don't know if you know this, but the vast majority of the people that are getting COVID and it being admitted into ICUs are people of minority descent. So, you're talking about African Americans, Latinos, in some cases, Asian Americans are being affected. So we're talking about an inordinate amount of the population getting this disease and getting it in a bad way, who are underrepresented in the medical community, who are underrepresented in their ability to get medical coverage. Okay. Now, Obamacare did a lot for that. There were a lot of African Americans that were able to get on some form of healthcare because of the passage of the Affordable Care Act. But the argumentation of many of these Black leaders right now is that it hasn't gone far enough. And I don't know if you saw in the news last week, Mayor Cranley of Cincinnati he petitioned our governor, Mike DeWine, to say that the way he's handling the distribution of the shots is wrong. And the way they've been doing it so far is, all right, everybody that's 75 and up can get the shot. All right, everybody that's 70 and up can get the shot. Everybody 65 and up. And they're gradually moving it down to where they're in the 40s now. But Cranley wrote an opinion piece and an open letter to DeWine saying that was insanely racist to do it that way for a number of reasons. Number one, the areas that were getting the least amount of shots but needed it the most were urban areas where, let's be honest, in the state of Ohio, that's where most African Americans live, is in places like Dayton, Cincinnati, Columbus, Cleveland, Toledo. Those health departments had the least amount of shots coming per capita. So it was harder to find a shot in Hamilton County than it was, let's say, in Warren or Butler County. That was basically Cranley saying that is a racist policy here because you're not getting the shots equally across the board. And then when you say 75 and up, well, the average lifespan of a Caucasian in Ohio for men and women is basically the early 80s. That's the life expectancy is early 80s. Well, for African Americans, it's early 70s to late 60s. So you're talking about an entire group of the population that has to wait on a shot, never mind that their life expectancy is shorter. Now, there are countless numbers of reasons why those demographics shift as badly as they do. But bottom line is, as Cranley was kind of pointing out, should it really be based on age as opposed to need? Also, he pointed out that a lot of people in the medical community have pointed out that these shots need to get to people who are diabetic, that diabetes is a major contributing factor towards COVID kind of wreaking havoc on the system. And Cranley was also pointing out that diabetes tends to affect African Americans more, whether it be because of dietary issues, a genetic thing, whatever. They're still trying to figure that out. But you're talking about why are African Americans being hospitalized more? It's because they have these contributing conditions. They're also talking about how cancer patients are not receiving the shot before just an elderly person. So, for example, what if, my parents are 68 and 69. They just got their first vaccine dose the other day, and they kind of delayed it a little bit, but they're in fairly decent health for being in their 60s. No cancer, nothing like that. My father was very upset because he has friends that are in their 50s who are cancer survivors who really probably should have the shot before him. And so it was kind of, that kind of argumentation. And that's kind of where we're at with all this is reparations are now becoming more of an issue because we're talking about very clear discrepancies between the races when it comes to access to care, when it comes to payment for jobs, when it comes to educational opportunities. So what I want you to do with this assignment is really look into, should the government, A, have to say officially that they are sorry? B, should the government actually have to take steps to, provide economic opportunities or to provide some sort of assistance towards the African American community? Should and if so, what should those look like? Should they be payments? Should there be checks like the stimulus payments that are going out? Should there be stimulus for African Americans? And if so, should certain African Americans get it, or should there be a check sent out to, let's say, Jay-Z, who's doing fine as it is? He doesn't need an extra check per se, or should it only go to people that are below the poverty line or whatever else? And if it doesn't take the form of checks, should it be in the form of college opportunities? Should it be in the form of, we invest heavily in African American schools? Should we invest heavily in community centers in African American communities? Kind of think to yourself, like, A, should they do it in the first place? And B, if they do, what should it look like? Now, if you think they shouldn't, well, what are the reasonings behind that? What are the reasonings to say, hey, maybe we're beyond this and need to move on? Because there are people who are making that argument as well, that, the time for reparations may have been necessary in the late 1800s and early 1900s to eliminate, let's say, things like Jim Crow, and to maybe kind of stifle the issues that contributed to things like the Great Migration later. It's kind of the argumentation of, should we do it now, or is it too late? So that's kind of where I want you to get at, because again, this is a newer argument. This is a newer presentation, if you will, of the same argument we've been having for a very long time. So after watching the videos, and Coates's article is very good. Now, I included on there that there is also an audio version of it there that you can just click on and listen to while you're doing other work. So if you don't have maybe time to sit there and read the whole article, it's exceptionally well done. He lays out pretty decent argument, and really it's enlightening because he goes back and does the history of the reparations argument as well. So not only presenting the argument, but showing you where it germinated from. So again, it's a good thing to do, because again, this is now becoming more and more of an issue. But do we actually accomplish something on it now, or do we allow it to go to the back burner and then resurface in another 10 to 20 years? That's really kind of up to your generation, quite honestly, to figure it out. Do we need to do it now, or do we wait, or do we just end the debate entirely? So that's kind of what I would like you to do with that research assignment. All right. So we're coming to the end here. That's kind of what's expected. Again, it says it's due on Friday, but you do have the weekend to finish up odds and ends with it and turn it in without any issues. If you have questions, obviously you can email me at any time. You can stay back on the Zoom meeting. And for some of you, I will see you on Monday during the second bell time period. Just a reminder, my class is in 240. So you would come to room 240 for that class if you're going to be here on Monday. Questions, comments, concerns?
No.
Thank you, Kevin.
No.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Bell. All right. You are free to go. If you have questions, you can feel free to stay behind, but otherwise have a great day. Stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you, you too.
Have a good one.